I always thought betrayal would be loud. A screaming fight. A slammed door. Something dramatic enough to prepare your heart. Instead, mine came in a 9-second voicemail on a Tuesday while I was microwaving leftover pasta. My mother's voice was calm. Polite. Almost cheerful. "Hi, Emily. We've talked it over. You're no longer part of the family decisions. Don't come by anymore. We're moving forward without you." No explanation. No argument. Just erased. I stood in my tiny Denver apartment, plastic fork in hand, pasta going cold, listening to the message again because my brain refused to accept it. I was 32 years old. Single. No kids. A senior risk analyst for a financial firm. The one who paid the lawyers. The one who set up the trusts. The one who built the LLC that owned half my parents' life. And apparently, I was disposable. So I did the only thing I know how to do when someone pulls the rug out from under me. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't call back. I logged in. And in less than 10 minutes, I quietly removed every single safety net they thought they had. They thought they were cutting me off. They had no idea, they just handed me all the leverage. I always imagined family betrayal would feel like a punch to the gut. Loud. Dramatic. Something you could pinpoint, hold on to, and maybe even scream back at. Instead, mine came in a 9-second voicemail. On a Tuesday. While I was microwaving leftover pasta. I pressed play. My mother's voice came through, flat and businesslike, like she was canceling a subscription, not cutting off her own daughter. "Hi, Emily. We've decided, you're no longer part of the family decisions. Don't come by anymore. We're moving forward without you." No explanation. No anger. No emotion. Just the verdict. I froze, plastic fork hovering halfway to my mouth. My apartment was quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint drip of the coffee machine, the faint scratch of Denver traffic outside, it all felt louder somehow. I pressed replay. Same words. Same calm. The same finality. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't call back. I couldn't. Because for 32 years, I'd been the one holding things together. The one making sure bills were paid, accounts balanced, lawyers informed, spreadsheets reconciled. The one who built the family LLC from scratch, set up the trusts, and made the trips, the rentals, the investments run like clockwork. The one they were trying to cut out, quietly, like I wasn't already holding all the leverage. For a second, I felt that old familiar pulse of anger, the one that always comes when someone thinks they can erase you. Then I took a breath, put the fork down, and went to my laptop. I logged into Mitchell Holdings LLC, the company my parents had relied on for years. The one holding our rental properties, the triplex we were about to close on, the accounts I had set up so meticulously that even the lawyers sometimes called me for guidance. Every permission tied to my name, every account linked to my signature, every approval waiting for my click, it was all mine. All under my control. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text. I didn't demand apologies. I didn't threaten. I didn't make a scene. I began quietly revoking access, freezing accounts, and putting formal holds on every pending transaction. No one could move money without my approval anymore, not the triplex deal, not the new rental lease, not the retirement account transfers. My mother's voice had been cold, almost clinical. But I realized something. They didn't just want to cut me off, they thought they could. They assumed they had the power. The problem was, I had built everything they relied on. And when you're the architect of someone's financial world, being excluded is impossible. I sat back, sipping my now cold coffee, and let the realization settle. My parents had tried to erase me. But I was still here. Still holding the keys. It wasn't about revenge yet. Not in the dramatic, shouting at the dinner table sense. It was about leverage. Information. Structure. Proof that I could step away and still make the entire system stall. The one they assumed they controlled. For the first time, I thought about my sister, Lily. She was quiet, probably waiting in the wings to see who would blink first. That little spark of suspicion nudged me. If this voicemail was intended to cut me off, someone was scripting the story of my exit without my consent. And scripts are fragile, they crumble in the face of facts. I finished my pasta. Cold. Unmoved. A strange satisfaction crept in. I had been wrong to think that betrayal meant losing everything. It could also mean knowing, secretly, that I had already won the first round. By the time the coffee was finished, the decision was made. The easy road they assumed they had through me? Gone. The phone calls, the messages, the lawyer letters, they could come. Let them come. Because the first move was mine. And in 9 seconds, the family who thought they could discard me had handed me all the leverage I would need. I didn't know how this would end. I didn't know if it would ever end. But I did know this, from the moment they said, "You're out," I had already begun the quietest, cleanest, sharpest revenge they could never see coming. By the next morning, my phone was vibrating itself toward the edge of my nightstand. I didn't reach for it right away. I already knew what I'd see. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts stacked on top of each other like panic. Mom. Dad. Unknown numbers. One from a law firm I recognized. I rolled onto my back, stared at the ceiling, and let the phone buzz itself out. For once, I wasn't rushing to be the fixer. The responsible one. The daughter who jumped every time someone needed something. Instead, I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. This was the part one understood. Systems. Permissions. Access. Risk. I logged into the family's banking portal and reviewed every linked account. Checking. Savings. Property reserves. Emergency fund. All of it had been built around my credentials. Not because I was power hungry, but because I was the only one who actually understood how to keep it secure. Now that detail mattered. One by one, I adjusted permissions. Read-only access for my parents. Removed third-party integrations. Paused outgoing transfers. Flagged large transactions for manual review. No alarms. No emails sent. Just silence. The kind of silence that only exists when something important stops working. Then I opened the real estate file. The triplex. Their dream project. The one they'd been bragging about at Sunday dinners. The one I'd qualified for, structured, and negotiated. My credit. My income. My planning. I called Susan, the agent. "Hey, it's Emily," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Oh. Hi, Emily," she replied, cheerful as always. "We're finalizing some documents this week. I need to formally withdraw as borrower and primary qualifier," I said. "Effective immediately." There was a pause. A long one. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. "Yes," I said. "I'm simply no longer participating." She hesitated. "Your parents were counting on." "I understand," I cut in gently. "Please note that any representation of me being involved going forward is inaccurate. I'll send written confirmation." And just like that, the backbone of the deal snapped. I ended the call and sent the email. Clean. Professional. Cold. No emotion, no explanation. Just facts. Then I moved to the retirement accounts. The ones I'd structured so they couldn't be drained or borrowed from in moments of bad judgment. I froze all modification requests. Locked beneficiary changes. Disabled online edits. By 9:14 a.m., every easy road they thought they had through me was gone. That's when I checked my phone. 42 missed calls. A voicemail from Mom. Emily, this is ridiculous. We need to talk. One from Dad. Kiddo, whatever this is, we can fix it. Please call me. And then, the lawyer. This is Evan Reed, counsel for your parents. We have a serious problem. Please return my call. I laughed. Out loud. A short, sharp sound that surprised even me. They were panicking. Not because I was gone. But because the structure I built was suddenly no longer obedient. I didn't call back. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I sent 3 texts. To Mom, I'm safe. I need time. To Dad, I saw the voicemail. I'm not ready to talk. To the lawyer, I will respond in writing. That was it. At work, my coworker Jenna leaned over my cubicle wall and said, "You look like you're about to commit a felony." I smiled thinly. Family stuff. She raised an eyebrow. The expensive kind? The manipulative kind. She nodded. Just remember, guilt is the most dangerous financial motivator. I almost laughed again. She had no idea how accurate that was. By lunchtime, the calls had doubled. My phone felt heavy in my bag. Like a live thing. And still, nothing from my sister, Lily. Not one text. Not one call. Just silence. Which told me more than any voicemail ever could. Because when chaos hits a family and one person is perfectly quiet, it usually means they're not surprised. It means they were waiting. And as I sat there, watching the call count climb, one thought settled in, clear and sharp. They thought they were cutting me out. But what they'd really done was wake me up. By mid-morning, the situation had escalated faster than I anticipated. My phone kept buzzing, Dad, Mom, unknown numbers, and then that insistent ping from Evan Reed, the family lawyer. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew what they thought, that I was out of control, overwhelmed, and maybe panicking. But the truth was the opposite. I was calm, methodical, and armed with a quiet fury sharpened by months of observation. I sat at my desk at the fintech office, coffee steaming beside me, and opened the security feed for my apartment. My dad had been lingering outside earlier, hands buried in his jacket pockets, glancing up at my second-floor window. Then he'd walked away. No knocking. No call. Just retreat. That detail told me everything I needed to know. They were starting to realize that being told "you're out" wasn't just words, they had underestimated the consequences. I opened my email and drafted a short, precise note to Susan, the agent handling the triplex. Professional, unemotional. Effective immediately, I withdraw from the purchase. My participation cannot be implied or represented in any future communications. Written confirmation attached. Hit send. The backbone of the deal was gone. Their expectations? Crushed. Next, I turned to the family LLC. My parents thought I was stepping away, my sister, Lily, thought they had me cornered. Neither of them realized that I controlled the keys. I systematically restricted access, froze potential edits, and locked permissions. Any action without my consent would trigger alerts, notifications, and legal documentation. Every lever they assumed was theirs to pull was quietly disabled. By the time I looked back at my phone, there were 46 missed calls, and a voicemail blinking from Evan Reed. I popped in my earbuds and let it play, a smile tugging at my lips despite the tension. This is Evan Reed, counsel for Mark and Diane Mitchell. His voice was clipped, professional, but there was an edge I recognized, the kind that comes when a lawyer realizes their clients are about to make a catastrophic misstep. We have a serious problem. Please return my call immediately. I typed a reply instead of calling. We have a problem. The problem isn't me being absent. The problem is what I have locked down. I will respond in writing. I could hear Jenna, my coworker, snickering as she leaned over my cubicle. You look like a ticking time bomb. I didn't bother correcting her. She had no idea that every move I was making had already been calculated days in advance, based on permissions, timestamps, and digital breadcrumbs. Then came the flood of texts. Mom, Claire, we need to talk. Dad, kiddo, whatever this is, we can fix it. Even one from a cousin, trying to gauge the truth from gossip. And still, nothing from Lily. Silence was loudest of all. I had learned early on in my career that panic reveals character. I knew exactly what was happening on the other side. My parents were frantically retracing steps, checking drafts, calling advisors, and trying to figure out where my control began and theirs ended. My sister was quietly orchestrating a narrative behind the scenes, but she hadn't accounted for one thing: I had built the narrative-proof structure. Every account, every transaction, every decision point, every what-if scenario I had modeled at work was now protecting me in real life. By late afternoon, I finally called Daniel Hayes, our former financial advisor, the one who had helped me establish the LLC and the retirement accounts. His reaction was telling. Claire, they've been trying to add another managing member behind your back. Drafts are floating, but nothing's been signed. If they try, it won't hold. The paperwork is incomplete. Your sister, she's playing a dangerous game. Dangerous? I smiled. Exactly. I didn't need to panic. I didn't need to argue. I had already built the safety net. I had already turned the table. And as the sun dipped behind the Denver skyline, I realized that for the first time, the people who thought they could push me out were panicking instead. The ones who had tried to erase me from my own work? They were about to learn that control is never given lightly, and sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding every last card. That evening, I started building what I came to call my family risk file. I pulled my laptop onto the kitchen table, cleared space, and opened a new folder. The coffee from the afternoon had long gone cold, but I didn't care. This wasn't about caffeine, it was about clarity, structure, and documenting everything before anyone had a chance to twist it. The first layer went in instantly: screenshots of texts from my parents begging me to call, Evan Reed's voicemail, the flood of missed calls from numbers I didn't even recognize, and the email from Susan, the real estate agent, confirming my withdrawal. Every timestamp, every delivery confirmation, every read receipt, I captured it all. This was the skeleton of the truth. Next came the financials. I opened the LLC dashboard and downloaded every recent activity log. Edits to the triplex purchase files, attempts at ownership changes, emails drafted by advisors, everything that had required my signature, every note where my consent had been faked or implied. I annotated each item: unauthorized, incomplete, requires live signature. It was quiet work, but methodical. Satisfying. Empowering. Then I turned to my sister, Lily. I scrolled through social media posts and DMs she had sent to extended family, the subtle narrative she had been building while I was supposedly overwhelmed or unstable. There were phrases carefully planted to manipulate perception: Claire is pulling away, she's exhausted, we need to step in. Each post was a claim without evidence, a story without timestamps. I saved screenshots and added notes: unverified, misleading, context missing. By the time the first night crept in, my folder was a small library of truth: PDFs, screenshots, and detailed notes, all arranged chronologically. I could trace the trajectory from that cold voicemail: "You're out. Don't come back," to every misstep my parents and sister had taken trying to cut me out. It was quiet, almost clinical revenge, but more powerful than anger or confrontation. It was irreversible. I realized something as I sorted through the files. This was more than about control or money. It was about credibility. My parents had acted impulsively, believing in the narrative my sister built, but credibility isn't a feeling, it's documentation. The folder wasn't just protection for me, it was evidence of their overreach, their assumptions, and their failure to verify facts before acting. Even with all this, I stayed calm. I didn't storm over to confront them yet. There was no need. Panic works better when the other side doesn't know what they're up against. And they didn't. Mom's repeated texts, my dad pacing the living room earlier, small signs of stress, they hadn't yet grasped the scale of what I had compiled. I added one last piece of evidence that night, a record of my movements on the day my sister claimed I had discussed pulling out of the LLC in the car ride home. Gas station receipts, Uber logs, timestamped social media check-ins, even the calendar entry noting the dinner I had actually attended. Every claim she made could now be cross-referenced with irrefutable proof. The folder was complete. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. The revenge wasn't dramatic, it didn't involve shouting matches or late-night confrontations. It was structural. It was quiet. It was the kind of revenge that couldn't be spun or softened by anyone else's narrative. By the next morning, I knew I was ready. My family had been trying to rewrite the story of my life without me, but now I had the definitive record. The evidence folder wasn't just a shield, it was the first move in a game that they had assumed I would passively lose. And now, for the first time in weeks, I felt the tiniest thrill of anticipation. The people who had thought they controlled the narrative were about to see just how precise my control could be. I closed the laptop, the glow of the screen fading in the dim kitchen light, and smiled quietly to myself. They didn't know it yet, but their story was about to unravel, and I had all the receipts. The night of the confrontation came sooner than I expected, but I had been ready. I carried my evidence folder under my arm, along with my laptop, and drove to my parents' house in the quiet of Denver's suburbs. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt from a drizzle earlier that evening. The house looked the same, soft beige siding, neatly trimmed hedges, but it felt different. I knew the dynamic inside had shifted before I even opened the door. Mom and Dad were sitting together on the living room couch, close but tense. Brooke was perched in her usual armchair, tissue clenched in her hand, eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. She wouldn't make eye contact with me. That was fine. I didn't need her to. The truth had a way of standing on its own. "Thanks for coming," Dad said quietly, his hands folded on his lap. Mom nodded faintly. I placed the folder on the coffee table and slid my laptop next to it. "Let's be clear," I said evenly. "Nothing here is off the record. If anyone lies, or tries to spin things, the evidence speaks for itself." Brooke scoffed, obviously trying to look unbothered. "Wow, way to make this hostile." "We're family," she said. I ignored her. "This is about consequences," I said, my voice steady. "You told me I was out. You tried to push changes behind my back. You built a narrative that made me appear unstable so you could assume control of what I built. That has to mean something beyond a Facebook post or an Instagram story." Mom's hands twisted together, her eyes flicking between Brooke and me. "Honey, maybe this could be handled more gently," she suggested. I shook my head. Gentle doesn't undo the voicemail. Gentle doesn't stop people from falsifying signatures or telling lies. Gentle doesn't protect my work. I built this, and I'm the one who has to make sure it survives intact. I opened the folder and began laying out the evidence one by one. Gas station receipts, Uber logs, timestamped emails, text messages, everything Brooke had claimed versus the reality of my actions. I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a dramatic scene. The proof spoke louder than any argument I could have shouted. Brooke's face slowly shifted from smug to startled. Her carefully curated narrative was crumbling in real time. "Wait, that's not what happened," she muttered. I didn't respond. I let Mom and Dad look through the documents, the screenshots, the emails, each item clearly labeled. Mom's eyes flicked up at me. Claire, this is, she trailed off, realization dawning. Brooke, Dad said slowly, his voice quiet but firm, what you told us, it doesn't match these documents. He leaned back, letting the words settle. Brooke's smugness faltered. I clicked through the laptop to Susan's email confirming my withdrawal from the triplex before Brooke tried to manipulate the story again. Here's the confirmation that I pulled out. No mention of mental health struggles, no excuses. The only reason I withdrew is because I no longer consent to my name or credit being used without my approval. Brooke opened her mouth, but Mom lifted a hand. Not this time, she said softly, her voice carrying more weight than any scolding I could deliver. The story you wrote for everyone else doesn't hold up against receipts and timestamps. I closed the laptop slowly and met Brooke's gaze. You thought you could rewrite reality to push me out. You thought my absence meant control was yours. It isn't. Not now. Not ever without my consent. Brooke's shoulders slumped. She realized, finally, that the person she tried to manipulate had anticipated every move, documented every lie, and held the cards that mattered. Her carefully crafted plan had collapsed quietly but completely. Mom exhaled and looked at me with something between pride and relief. Claire, thank you, she whispered. Dad nodded, his eyes still serious but softened by trust restored. The room was silent after that, except for the faint hum of the heater. Brooke shifted, clearly defeated. She finally muttered, so, what now? I stood up, gathering my folder. Boundaries now. Truth now. You start from scratch if you want to earn anything. Nothing retroactive, nothing assumed. Everything has to be earned, built, documented. No shortcuts, no narratives, no manipulation. Mom and Dad nodded in agreement. Brooke stared at me, her eyes wide, realizing her leverage had evaporated. The confrontation was over. Not with drama, not with yelling, but with structure, with evidence, and with the quiet certainty that truth, when documented and unassailable, is the most powerful tool of all. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up with a sense of calm that surprised me. The tension of the previous days had finally funneled into something concrete. I wasn't angry, at least not the raw, jittery kind that comes with shock and betrayal. I was focused. I had work to do, the kind of work that couldn't be undone, the kind of work that would make any future attempts at manipulation impossible. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and created a new folder I labeled Mitchell Family Risk File. Everything went in, screenshots, emails, text messages, receipts, voicemail transcriptions, timestamps. Each item was labeled, chronologically ordered, color-coded for easy reference. This wasn't just about proving Brooke wrong, it was about building a system that safeguarded the future, no matter what stories she tried to tell. First, I contacted Jason Liu, the financial advisor my parents had recently started using under Brooke's influence. Jason, I said when he picked up, I need everything you've seen regarding the Mitchell Holdings LLC and the retirement accounts. Any draft documents, suggested changes, anything Brooke or anyone else has proposed in my absence. There was a pause. You've got it. Some of the drafts were questionable, Claire. Your mom and Brooke have been working with someone trying to add new managing members and co-trustees without your approval. None of it went through, right? I asked. Not a single document was signed, and I flagged all of them as unauthorized pending your confirmation. Good. That was exactly what I needed. I felt the first genuine flicker of control. Everything else was just process. I spent the morning updating the LLC operating agreement. I explicitly stated that no new managing members could be added without unanimous written consent from the existing ones, my dad and me. Brooke's name had no place anywhere in the document. There wasn't even a blank line left where she could later pencil herself in. Next, I tackled the retirement accounts. Each account was reviewed line by line, signature authority confirmed, and access rights tightened. My mom remained a beneficiary, but she had no authorization to make any unilateral financial decisions. I looped in Evan Coleman, the lawyer, for for any final legal approval. He confirmed every move. "Claire, you've created a bulletproof setup. No one can act without your and your dad's consent," he said, his tone approving but not celebratory. I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt aligned. For the first time in weeks, the structures I had built, the ones I had spent years designing and protecting, were fully secured. Brooke had attempted to manipulate not just my parents' perception, but the actual legal and financial foundations of the family business. And now? Every attempt to touch anything without my approval would fail. I sent a clear email to Brooke, framed the way I would at work: professional, concise, and unarguable. No accusations, no dramatic flair. Any attempt to alter ownership, signature authority, or financial structure related to Mitchell Holdings LLC, its associated properties, or retirement accounts without my written consent is unauthorized and may constitute fraud. Do not sign my name. Do not imply my approval. All actions will be documented and shared with legal counsel. I pressed send and felt the tension in my shoulders relax slightly. The defenses were in place. The boundaries were defined. It wasn't about revenge in the way most people imagine: loud, vindictive, aggressive. It was quiet, precise, and unshakable. Brooke had tried to manipulate reality to insert herself into a life she hadn't earned. Now, all her leverage was gone. By the time my dad came home that evening, I had walked him through the entire process. Every document, every change, every safeguard. He nodded, his eyes tired but relieved. "Claire," he said, "you didn't just protect yourself, you protected all of us from making a mistake we wouldn't see until it was too late." I smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for revenge, Dad. I did it to stop the cycle. If Brooke wants to prove herself now, she'll have to start with her own work. No shortcuts, no pretending, no using someone else's life as a ladder." Mom stayed quiet, watching me, understanding at last the depth of what had been attempted against me. The family finances, the LLC, everything I had built with sweat and precision, was now insulated. I finally felt safe, not just emotionally, but structurally. Every future attempt to manipulate or exploit me would now encounter an immovable wall of facts, dates, and documents. By the end of the week, Mitchell Holdings LLC and the retirement accounts were fully secured. Brooke tried sending messages, but they were no longer urgent, no longer threatening. I could choose to read them or not. And for the first time in months, I could focus on life outside the storm. My family's financial future was intact. My boundaries were clear. And most importantly, the person who had tried to take control without consent was powerless. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, letting the hum of my laptop be the only sound. Control wasn't a weapon, it was freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. A few weeks after I locked everything down, I got an unexpected knock at my office door. It wasn't the kind of polite, scheduled meeting my coworkers expected. It wasn't even the UPS guy. It was Brooke. Her face was red, eyes glossy, hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow still looked deliberate. She clutched a thick binder like it was a weapon, or maybe a lifeline. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, and studied her. "Hi, Brooke," I said slowly. "I wasn't expecting visitors today. I have a business plan," she blurted, waving the binder slightly. "It's all laid out. I've planned events, brand partnerships, influencer collaborations. I just need some seed money. I can prove it will work. You'll see." I didn't move. Didn't reach for the binder. "Start it without me," I said flatly. "If it works, you won't need my money. If it doesn't, you'll know exactly why I said no." Her face crumpled, the first flash of raw panic cutting through the carefully rehearsed outrage I'd seen in her texts. "You're really not going to help me," she whispered, almost pleading. "No," I said. I wasn't mean. I wasn't cruel. I was firm. "Not after everything. Not after you tried to manipulate the narrative of my absence, claim I was unstable, and insert yourself into decisions that weren't yours to make. Her bottom lip trembled, but she quickly recovered, shifting into the next angle I'd seen her use 1,000 times, entitlement masked as rationality. Come on, Claire, she said. If you just invest a little, you can see me prove everyone wrong. I just need a chance. That's all I'm asking. Isn't family supposed to help each other? I shook my head slowly, feeling a strange calm. Brooke, you're confusing help with insurance. I don't invest in people's ambitions when those ambitions rely on the work and control of someone else. You want to prove yourself? Start with nothing, like I did. Build something that doesn't require me, my work, or my credit. Otherwise, this conversation is over. She blinked, lips parting, like she couldn't believe she wasn't going to wrangle me. You're really, just going to walk away? Yes, I said firmly, standing up and picking up my bag. I've spent weeks securing every bit of leverage you thought you had. There's no backdoor, no shortcut, no way to manipulate the system. The structures are in place. Your role now is your own, not mine. If you want control, you earn it, you don't take it. Her knees sank into the carpet like she'd been figuratively pushed down. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't give her a chance. I walked out, past the receptionist, past the rows of cubicles, past the hum of fluorescent lights and ringing phones. She didn't follow. She didn't argue. She didn't have the leverage to. Back in my car, I sat for a long time, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. I thought about the binder she had tried to thrust into my hands, the social media campaigns she had meticulously outlined, the meticulously rehearsed narrative she had created in her mind to make me the villain. I thought about the months she spent quietly maneuvering behind my back while I handled every bit of responsibility that actually kept the family afloat. And I realized something important: the quietest form of revenge isn't confrontation. It's boundaries. It's control. It's letting someone face the consequences of their own actions while you continue moving forward. Brooke's plan had depended on my compliance. My absence, my weakness, my willingness to step aside and let her slide in, those were her tools. Once I removed the tools, she was left holding nothing but her own ambition. A week later, I got an update from our real estate agent. The triplex purchase had finally closed, secured entirely under the names and authority of the people who had actually handled it responsibly: my dad, my mom as beneficiary, and me. Brooke tried sending a couple of follow-up texts asking for advice or guidance, but I didn't respond. She didn't have a seat at the table anymore, and the systems I built ensured she couldn't create one behind my back. Sitting on my balcony that evening, watching the Denver skyline glow as the sun set, I felt a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks, no public callouts, no social media posts. It was subtler, sharper, and far more permanent. Brooke's attempt to insert herself into my work had failed because I had chosen boundaries over vengeance, preparation over panic, and clarity over chaos. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's invisible. It's structural. It's knowing you've built a life and a system that protects not just yourself, but everyone who depends on you. Brooke's lesson was simple: if you want to be part of the family business, or anything that matters, you start by earning it, not stealing it. And as for me? I finally felt free to breathe, knowing my work, my boundaries, and my future were mine, and mine alone. After weeks of legal documents, carefully documented emails, and clear boundaries, the house finally felt like it belonged to me again, not in a possessive way, but in a sense of control and stability I hadn't had in months. My parents had agreed, reluctantly but genuinely, to let me take the reins of the LLC and the retirement accounts. Brooke was no longer able to insert herself anywhere. The structures were airtight, signatures and permissions meticulously defined, and any attempt to interfere would be instantly traceable. It was quiet, but it was permanent. That weekend, I visited the triplex for the first time since everything had settled. The pale brick building reflected the late afternoon sun. My dad was fussing over the placement of a bird feeder, Mom was in the kitchen prepping snacks for a neighbor who had popped by, and I realized with a small, satisfied smile that the chaos of the past months had finally subsided. No one was arguing. No one was pretending. The only voices were real, practical, and cooperative. I spent some time walking through my unit, checking the spreadsheets I had set up for the property management, rental schedules, and emergency maintenance funds. Everything was in place. Every dollar accounted for, every potential loophole plugged. The sense of security was intoxicating. For once, I wasn't just reacting, I was building and protecting in the way I knew I could. Later, while cooking with Mom in the kitchen, she looked over at me with a kind of softness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Claire, I was wrong," she said quietly. "We thought we were helping, but we pushed too hard. We didn't see how capable you were, and how much you'd been carrying." I didn't need to answer. I could feel the truth of it in her tone. Years of being told I was responsible, of taking the weight of the family on my shoulders, had finally been recognized, not with words alone, but with a system that respected my work and my boundaries. Dad joined us, leaning against the counter. "We're lucky to have you," he said simply. "Not just with the money stuff. With everything." His eyes met mine with genuine acknowledgement. The relief in the room was palpable. No lectures, no guilt trips, just recognition and cooperation. Brooke's absence was noticeable, but in a quiet, almost liberating way. She had moved into a small apartment across town, and word through cousins and friends was that her plans were struggling. The social media narratives she had built about me being unstable and controlling had fizzled quietly once the evidence and the structure made it impossible to push her story. She had the freedom to try and succeed on her own terms, but no longer at my expense. Over the next few weeks, I established a new routine. Weekday mornings were spent at work, evenings managing the LLC and finances, weekends in the triplex cooking with Mom, helping Dad with light repairs, and enjoying the small, practical rhythms of family life. It wasn't glamorous, but it was secure. It was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel the constant weight of manipulation or potential betrayal. The most surprising part was the peace that came from boundaries. By saying no, by refusing to give access or trust without transparency, I discovered that love doesn't require compliance. Family doesn't mean being everyone's safety net at the cost of your own stability. I could forgive without relinquishing control, and I could protect without punishing. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit on the balcony overlooking Denver, watching the skyline glow in gold and purple, thinking about how far I had come. From that voicemail telling me I was out to a fully secure and functional system where everyone knew their place, the journey had been exhausting, but it had taught me something invaluable: strength isn't loud, it's deliberate. Revenge isn't always dramatic, often, it's simply setting the record straight, establishing boundaries, and letting others deal with the consequences of their own actions. I had built a system, a life, and a family balance that respected the truth and my effort. Brooke had her chance to prove herself, and she chose her own path. I chose mine. And for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. In the end, I realized that family isn't about blind loyalty or giving access to every secret account. It's about respect, boundaries, and trust earned over time. By standing firm, documenting every move, and refusing to be manipulated, I didn't just protect my finances, I protected myself. The revenge wasn't dramatic, it was structural. Brooke could try to spin a story online or manipulate narratives, but the systems I built were airtight. She had no access, no leverage, no shortcut into what I earned or safeguarded. I didn't have to fight publicly. I didn't have to yell or humiliate. I just quietly drew the line and let reality speak. Mom and Dad learned the hard way that assuming someone will comply just because they care is dangerous. Love doesn't excuse misrepresentation, and forgiveness doesn't mean giving up control of your life or your work. Sometimes, the strongest act of love is holding people accountable while still caring for them. I kept the triplex, the LLC, and the retirement accounts intact. I continued to build my career and my life without having to compromise my principles or safety. Brooke eventually carved out a path for herself, but it was hers alone. And for the first time in years, I felt calm, confident, and finally unshakable. The voicemail that once seemed like a cruel sentence had been the trigger for clarity. In protecting myself, I protected my family's future, and discovered that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge is simply ensuring no one can hurt you again.